Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah, everyone all set, cocked, locked? Your dial is set to Sonny Skidmore's favorite radio broadcast. Sonny Skidmore, owner, KLID, AM 1340. Poplar Bluff, Missouri. She owns a radio station that is kind enough to carry USA Prepares as an affiliate, and there are others too. Thank you so much to all of our affiliates. Blake is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Blake. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Stephen Heuer's with us, Synergistic Nutrition, SGN80.com. And that would be SGN80.com. Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning, Vincent. Sorry you're having drought out there.
Wow. I got an email from Norm Shealy this morning, and Dr. Shealy said, hey, we got 2.8 inches of rain out in his neck of Missouri. And I responded, great, sounds good. We got 0.25 in the last 3 days. He was talking about the last 3 days.
We've had tons of rain where I live in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, well, I just talked to our son, and it looks like we're going to haul off a couple large loads of cows to be sold. We just can't keep them. And it's what do you do? What do you do? So we're going to have close to 3/4 of our herd of cows, which is really going to put a dent in everything we do from now on, because we're going to have to rebuild the herd should the grass ever grow again, and it's dependent on rain. And it's just for our neck of the woods, it's really a bad situation. And back in the 1950s, I believe 1959, here in Missouri, the drought was so bad that the deer, there weren't any deer, there weren't any rabbits, there was no wildlife. And farmers were cutting down trees, literally cutting down trees so their cows could eat the leaves of the trees. Now that didn't last very long, because I tried it. I cut down a tree that was in the way. Normally I just don't cut trees down. I just don't want to do it, no matter what. But we had a tree that was going to fall over anyway. It was a small tree, and I cut it down just to see, just in case we ever had to do it. 20 minutes later, there weren't any leaves on it. I mean, it didn't last very long. So I can't imagine cutting down, trees for cows to eat, because there just aren't enough leaves. And it takes so long to grow a tree. It's like not a good solution. I got one last thing before we get into the meat of today's discussion. I got a call from Sonny Skidmore. I mentioned her name. She owns KLID in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And she said, Vincent, she calls me every couple of weeks. And she said, Vincent, your broadcast is so different. You have such a variety of instructors. It's great. She said, and she really likes that guy that talks about nutrition. And I said, Stephen Heuer? She said, yes.
Cool.
So,
that's good.
Isn't that wonderful? It's
nice that there's ears out there that appreciate that subject, yeah. Well,
not only that, Sonny Skidmore was a DJ, and she's met a lot of the greats and the country and western greats. I mean, a lot of the big names. She's met many of them over the decades, and she listens to this broadcast intently. Well, I mean, it's her job. I mean, to do that, because if we weren't doing something that she thought her radio audience, if she thought her radio audience wasn't interested in, she should do the right thing and throw us overboard. but she listens intently, and she loves what we do, and she loves you. So I just wanted to give you that compliment.
Thank you. That's nice.
From upon high. I mean, Sonny Skidmore is an expert, absolute expert in radio. She's about, somewhere near Dr. Shealy's age, so she's been around long enough to know what's good and what's not. So I just want to pass that along. So
thank you.
One of the things that we want to do, Stephen Heuer, of synergistic nutrition is I want to raise the bar. I got a couple suggestions that, if you want to expand your listening base, lower the bar, lower it so that, more people can understand what you're saying. And my response to that is absolutely no. No, we want to raise the bar. We want to bring them up so that they will learn more rather than learn less.
I so agree with you. I mean, it's like, for years now, I've been doing this journey of figuring out the science of how the body works in healing, and it's like, I feel like the terms are just a part of what everyone should have become their vocabulary, because it's like, if you don't understand these terms, you don't understand what's really going on, then you're going to be a victim the next time you get sick. You're going to do what the doctor tells you to do, and you're going to become a statistic. So, I mean, I agree. I don't think we should dumb it down at all, because in essence, everybody needs to know this, because everybody should be living a high-quality life.
Mm-hmm. And I also believe that the more sophisticated our vocabulary and the more and the larger our vocabulary is, the greater our ability to think deeper, wider, and more precisely. So we can think better. We can, if we know more words, and we have to know what those words mean. If we only know 2 words, it's hard to be imaginative. So, based on that, you sent me an email, and it is going to raise the bar. Absolutely no question. So, pleomorphism versus monomorphism. That's what we're going to talk about today. Stephen, take it away.
Okay, so first off, we want to just back it up and make sure that people don't just blink out because of the words. Let's define them. So morphism means form, pleo means many, mono means single. So pleo means many forms versus a single form. So these are words used in the field of microbiology. So there's been a debate going on in the microbiology world ever since the 1850s, so about 150 years now. And it started with Louis Pasteur and Antoine Béchamp. These were 2 men defining the field of microbiology back in the 1850s, and Béchamp had his point of view based on his experiments, and Pasteur had his point of view, and actually Pasteur plagiarized quite a bit of Béchamp's findings. But Pasteur's theory was that the blood is sterile. There's these germs outside of us, microorganisms outside of us, that when they come in contact and get inside our bodies, we're subject to disease, infectious or otherwise. And Antoine Béchamp said, well, and this guy is the guy that figured out how to make aniline dyes, so really bright colors that would never existed before, that could be used in clothing material. And then he also figured out the disease that was causing the wine industry in France to be decimated at one point in time, and basically how to fix that and save the wine industry. This guy was a really smart guy, came up with some major life-saving or major game-changing discoveries. And one of them was that using his microscope, he basically took the tissue of a plant, the sap of it, and put it underneath in a slide under a microscope. And he noticed there was these like white motile particles dancing around. And then he took that same leaf and he froze it and thawed it, and then took the juice and put the juice on the slide and looked at it again. And now those particles were growing into long strands and becoming something that they weren't before. He also took like he'd let a rabbit die, and then he'd bury it into basically a lime powder, a rock calcium powder. And so there's basically no other organisms present. It's like a sterile rock media. And then this rabbit body would basically decompose, and he'd take some of the decomposed material and liquefy it, put it under the microscope again, and again he'd see these dancing white motile particles. So he found that this particular substance existed universally in animal tissues and plant tissues and human tissues or blood, and that he called it the microzyma, and that under right terrain conditions, this particular white motile particle is contributing to producing hormones and causing cell division and maintaining the health of the animal or plant tissue. Once the terrain became damaged, whether that's toxicity or injury, now these little particles would grow into bacterial forms, is what they called them, and then eventually on into fungal forms. So he basically was analyzed later that when the human body dies, there's 30 different kinds of fungi that will grow out of the body to decompose it back to soil. And so this is that white motile particle in the human body going from what's called a plant protein. It's basically the most primitive form of Aspergillus niger and mucorracemiosis. These are the two dominant plant proteins that actually serve a regulatory role in the body when the body's terrain is healthy. So when the body's pH is alkaline, and this is reflected in your saliva pH should be 7 to 7.5. Urine pH should be 6 to 6.8 to basically be in a really healthy terrain where you have high enough oxygen levels that you're in an aerobic cellular processes. When you're acidic, you go, acidity causes you to have lower oxygen levels and thus create an anaerobic environment for funguses and molds to grow. So basically that aspect, and then the level of toxins in the body. So that's heavy metals, chemicals, drugs, allopathic drugs that have stored in the body, previous antibiotic usage. All these things can alter the human terrain so that this thing that we call the endobiont, this is the term that Gunther Enderlein came up with. So basically this protein is the regulatory factor for life or death depending upon what terrain you give it. And so basically Pasteur theorized that the germ was the cause of disease. Béchamp said it's not the germ, it's the terrain. It's the environment of the tissues that determines whether or not you're creating an environment for these things to grow or not. And at Pasteur's deathbed, when he was on his deathbed, he admitted that Béchamp was correct. He said, I was wrong. The microbe is nothing. The terrain is everything. So, obviously that didn't reach very many people's ears because we see in modern medicine today and in the FDA regulatory department, they're basically always trying to wage war on the microorganism. I mean, the fact that, we have this incident years ago where somebody ate raw almonds in California and they suffered some kind of an E. coli infection, and they're blaming the almonds, and the E. coli is the problem, so let's sterilize all the almonds and basically give you dead food from now on. Well, I'll tell you more on the other side of the break.
Stephen Hewer's with us. Synergistic Nutrition, SGN80.com. We'll be right back. Class, I can't always talk to Stephen Hewer whenever I want to. Yesterday I called him, and he was busy in a consultation. And he was going to be tied up for the rest of the day talking to clients. And so, Stephen, let me give out your number, 888-988-3325, 888-988-3325. Can you just tell us for a couple seconds before we talk about almonds, what you do with your consultations, how that works?
Okay, so whether you're remotely consulting with me over the phone or whether you're in person, yesterday I had somebody in person, and you fill out a health evaluation form. It's fairly lengthy so that I know all your health history. It gives me the most information about what to do. I also do what's called a QEST-4 scan, QEST-4. It's a sophisticated EAV device. That's electroacupuncture according to Vol. So I can literally test a person in person or remotely. And if it's remotely, I use some of their hair, like half a teaspoon of their hair as a witness. And, because we're all connected to the quantum field, this, omnipresent God force, everybody is connected, so the machine connects to that person individually and gets accurate information even though they're remote. Do those two things, and if they're here physically, I also scan them on my AMP coil. So I have a device called the AMP coil where you use a computer notepad, you speak into it, and based upon your voice analysis, the scan enables the machine to determine which frequencies you need most. So whether it's frequencies that are designed to kill pathogens or frequencies that are designed to improve the energy function of your organs. And that's a super powerful device. I bought that device because on their website there's testimonies, and they're all super impressive, but one of them was a guy that was cured of Lyme's disease in 3 months, and another one was a girl that had hyperthyroid that was cured. And I've used this device for months now, and it's the most effective device I've ever used to kill, like, herpes and Epstein-Barr and things like that. And so, and then also when he was here yesterday, the gentleman that was here, he did these amp coil, plus he also spent half an hour on the biocharger. So the biocharger is a Tesla coil that broadcasts a signal, excites gas-filled tubes, and becomes a biological energy that literally fills your body with energy. So after half an hour, you can feel like really good, whether it's you want to have a more meditative mind, or whether you want to have physical energy, or help your kidney or liver function better. It's very powerful. So if you're here in person, you get more. I spent about 4 hours with you. If you're remote by phone, I spend about 3 hours and basically cover A to Z. And then I get people on the supplements they need, both isopathic remedies from Europe that help break down long-standing chronic and hidden infections, and just basic nutrients that are needed for undermethylators or whatever. So usually people feel pretty good the first, couple of days after starting the program, and I also instruct them on diet and what's going to be the most optimal diet for their regeneration and healing.
Now, is that Tesla coil the same one that you brought to the Get Prepared Expo here in Missouri?
That one is called the Tesla Energy Lights that I brought to that expo in Missouri, but this one is called the Biocharger, and it's actually a little bit stronger. I find that the Tesla Energy Lights is conducive to, it makes you feel more like spiritual, like your aura is being cleaned. But the Biocharger feels like it gives you more physical energy. Okay. You're talking about terrain is everything and almonds. Please continue that discussion. So basically, the FDA has basically made all California almonds, they have to be steamed, and therefore killed all the microorganisms and the actual sproutable germ oil within the almonds. Everything's killed because you have to steam it in order to be able to sell it legally in the United States of America. The same thing with the Odwalla Juice Company, I think it was. Basically, there was a batch of apple juice that somebody drank that contracted E. coli, and a few people did, but one person was so sick that they put them in the hospital, gave them a bunch of antibiotics, and they died. Kidney failure. And so now they've made the juice companies have to pasteurize their juice. And then, I think it was Coca-Cola that bought them out in the end. And it's just the same name, but it's being sold by Coca-Cola, and it's all pasteurized fruit and vegetable juices. So what people don't realize is that the enzymatic activity and the structured water and things, those are all lost. You don't get the benefit of all the enzymes that's in the fruit and vegetable juice. You don't get the structured water now because it's been pasteurized, or the almonds. You don't get the vitamin E and the benefits. So this idea that you have to kill the germ to protect the body from disease is killing the whole society, because you've got a government that's enforcing it so that your food's consistently more dead than ever. So people need to understand this to protest and get the FDA to get off our back.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Stephen Heuer, SGN80.com. So Stephen Heuer, if we were to boil down the last half hour of what you were explaining and teaching us in class today, would it be that you can't be healthy eating dead food? An example might be similar to what we might have heard about on the news, the real news, that you can take a McDonald's hamburger and you can leave it out for a couple of years and it kind of looks the way it looked when you first left it out, being dead food, chemically preserved food. If you eat that kind of food, you can't be healthy, period. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's what we're saying. And, it's like the older you get, when you're younger, your body's detox capacity is greater. And so, people eat these junk foods and seemingly don't have any negative effects because their body's liver, kidney, respiratory, perspiration are all working so fast. But ultimately, it does catch up with them usually, and you see kids with acne in high school and stuff, and it's because those toxins are coming out through the skin. It's really based upon how well you detox, and so that's dependent upon your genetic strength or weakness. The older generations were genetically stronger, so they, drank their alcohol every night, smoked their cigarettes every night, ate their cooked food their whole lives, and still had, all their marbles when they're in their 80s and still functioning pretty well. The later generations are weaker genetically because of a lot of things. And so their detox capacity is weaker, so they're going to feel the effects of that, drug, that allopathic drug they're taking more. They're going to feel the effects of the cooked foods or the fast foods more. So it's really how much of this debris builds up. So when you eat cooked foods are, lost their electron activity, their enzyme activity. There's denatured proteins. There's lipid peroxides and things from cooked proteins. So those are all toxic to the body. Your liver, kidneys, and lymph system have to take time to excrete them. And if they can keep up with that excretion process, then there's no buildup. But if they're not keeping up with it, and that's what happens the older you get, they don't keep up with it, this stuff builds up. It's what causes your annual colds and flus. And then people ignorantly try and stop the cold or flu with their Tylenol or their antibiotics and stuff, which is the worst thing you could do. You would be much better off to let it run its course, because the course of an infection is basically nature trying to clean up the body. It's the bacteria and viruses are acting like janitors to digest and decompose and excrete things that built up in your system and your body couldn't do on its own. So it's best to let a cold or flu run its course. And you could use natural things to help you drain and detox quicker and overcome the infection quicker, but just don't suppress it with allopathic drugs. That's the worst thing you could do. But yeah, I mean, I've come to the point where I have to eat raw pretty much 90 to 100% of the time if I want to feel my best. So that's raw vegetarian, that's raw animal proteins. It's only cooked foods that end up being the one thing you have control over. You don't have control over the environmental pollutants. You don't have control over the electromagnetic pollution you're exposed to, but you do have control over the water you drink and the food that you eat. And so, if you want maximum quality life, it's got to be raw, 100% raw. The people that have chosen that life path have proven to be the most healthiest people and the most well-known teachers in the healing arts field. But this subject of the microorganism is like, people are it's in their subconscious. So I could say this all day long, and it's still going to just pass over water off water off duck's back, because their subconscious is telling them that germ is the cause of disease. Just like you had Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was told as a little kid that the germ was going to possibly kill him. He needed to be very fearful and protective of himself from germs. So in this subconscious belief took over his life as an adult, and he was extremely paranoid of microorganisms. He wouldn't shake your hand unless he had a glove on. Just very, very paranoid life. That's the subconscious. So people have to learn to re-educate the subconscious. And if they take time to read a good book on the subject, like Bechamp or Pasteur, that's one book that's out there, and you could read up on the Gunther Enderlein and all his discoveries like I've studied. You'll find that there's major scientists that already disagreed with Pasteur way back in his day. You had Claude Bernard. He disagreed with him. He was a contemporary of his. You had a Russian scientist named Eli Mechnikov who also disagreed with Pasteur. He said it wasn't the germ, it was the terrain. And he was so confident in his findings that he, in front of an audience, this Russian guy, Eli Mechnikov, drank cholera-infected water and did not suffer one cholera symptom, proving that the microbe is not the cause, it's the terrain. It's kind of like mosquitoes. Mosquitoes seek out a stagnant pond of water to, lay their eggs in and breed new mosquitoes. The stagnant pond wasn't caused by the mosquitoes. It's just the ideal environment. Just like germs and viruses, fungus, and bacteria are going to go to the toxic, damaged tissues of the body. And there's that thing called maggot therapy back in World War II, and things when the soldiers were injured and left on the field for long lengths of time before they could be attended to by medical personnel. The flies would lay eggs in their wounds, and the maggots would eventually hatch, and they would eat only the unhealthy, damaged tissue, and thus saving their leg from gangrene and saving their leg from amputation. So there's things like this in nature, like that example, that points that this is actually the case, that germs and viruses and things, because the human microbiome is growing every day. It's not just the digestive tract bacteria; it's the bacteria that are all throughout the body, all throughout the skin. If bacteria were the cause and the problem, then why is it infants throughout the world always put dirt in their mouth and objects off the ground in their mouth full of bacteria? Because there could be millions of bacteria in a little bit of dirt, and they're not harmed from it. So it's a big topic. And so I worked with basically this guy Gunther Enderlein in Germany, looked at blood under a microscope for 60 years and basically identified all these life cycles of this protein that we call the endobiome. And when the terrain is healthy, it doesn't grow into the bacterial forms. When the terrain is unhealthy, it grows into the bacterial forms, and you can see it in the blood analysis under the microscope. And so he developed these remedies where you let the aspergillus or the mucor grow from its infant stage all the way to a mature mold, and then it fruits its they call it spermates. It's the spores. It fruits these, and these spermates are now the remedy. You can actually take them supplementally, and they'll go in and they'll copulate with the pathogenic forms of the bacteria and cause them to break down into harmless forms. So mucor is good for getting rid of congestion in the body and the circulation system. Aspergillus is used for the bones and for the nervous system. Quentons is used for viral infections. Penicillium notatum is used for bacterial infections plus alleviating inflammation. So we've got all these remedies that are just work wonders in the body to unblock chronic stuck conditions with people, haven't been well for a long time. And I actually started working with these back in the 90s, and but then I had that interference with the FDA from 2005 to 2015. I had 10 years of court hearings, in and out of jail, prison, all that stuff. So I was distracted heavily from my own profession and exploring all the different tools that I have in my armamentarium. But now I'm finally getting back into working with the what's called isopathic remedies, and it's really, they're excellent. I'm impressed with the results we're getting.
Stephen, you mentioned jail and prison, and I've told our class that I've been attacked by the state of Missouri, threatening me over unpaid sales tax for $100,000, and they came after me, and they wanted our everything, and I fought them because it was not true. It was absolutely bogus. Right. So when you mention jail and prison, class, I want to make sure that y'all understand that you can be arrested and you're not a criminal. You can be arrested and you're not a criminal.
You can have a felony and you're not a criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple times that I went to a convention here in Missouri, and the cops show up. And they go, "Are you Vincent Finelli?" Yeah. You step outside? Did I do something wrong? Step outside. Did you see me do something wrong? Please step outside. Or what? Or you're going to jail. It's like, what? Okay, tell you what. I paid $10 to come into this convention. I want my money back, and then let me get my money back, and then I'll go outside with you guys. And then, I was with another guy, and one of our instructors, and he said, yeah, well, I drove him, so I want my $10 back too. And then we went outside, and they said, you know what? Would you just go away, please? And if you go away, we won't arrest you. So I could have fought it out with them. They were ready to shoot me. Literally, I have a picture of that. One guy was ready to draw his gun on me, and we left. But the point is, class, that you can be arrested, you can spend some time in jail, and not have committed a crime, and not be a felon. Yeah, however, they can determine that you are a felon, even though you're not. So I just want to make sure that you're clear on that. I know Stephen Heuer. I've spent quite a bit of time with him. I really like him, and I'm proud to call him my friend. And I'm proud to have him. Well, I'm proud to have him as a USA Preparedness instructor. Heck, Stephen, really, if this will sound a little dictatorial, but if I didn't like you, and I didn't trust you, and I didn't believe in you, you wouldn't be on the air. It's as simple as that.
I would expect that, yeah, sure.
At least with me, okay? So, class, I want to make sure. Yeah. So, Stephen, what do? So we eat foods that are cooked in animal fats. We are surrounded by toxins every 360 degrees, surrounded by toxins. What you recommend? Raw, right? Raw meat.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
But the thing is,
how's the average guy going to do that?
Most people won't do that, but it is plausible and easy to do if you have health issues that you've not been able to overcome, and you're tired of suffering and you want quality of life. You may become motivated enough to read the books on it. We Want to Live, and the other one, The Recipe for Living Without Disease, and learn what this one man discovered that had autism and cured himself, and had type 1 diabetes and cured himself, and bone cancer and cured himself, and basically became this stellar example of a super radiantly healthy person on an all raw primal diet. We know raw vegetable juices, raw meats, raw eggs, raw milk, raw cream, raw butter, raw everything, right? And then there's the Luke Corona guy who's raw vegan vegetarian who thrives on that diet, and he's like Hercules at 64 and still planning on getting married and having kids. He's got so much energy. And so the raw diet is putting living food. When you look at a Kirlian photography of the energy field of living food, you could see an actual like a little lightning storm of energy and with colors radiating off of that food, depending on how much life force it has. The less life force it has, the smaller the sparks are and the less light there is, and the more you can see it. So the living foods have this life force, and that gets downloaded into your body. It's just like when you're breathing. You're not living off just the oxygen that you're breathing in the air. There's something called prana in the air. Prana is this electrical spark. It's like the life energy of God that you're breathing and charging your body up with just breath all the time. So life foods have that pranic energy, and they make you live longer with higher quality of life.
All right, we'll be back. I've got a question
I'll give you an
for
option.
Yeah, okay. And I've got a question for you when we come back.
Okay.
Stephen Heuer. So, Stephen, when I was growing up, I was born in the 1950s, the early 1950s. And when I was at my grandmother's and grandfather's house, the first time I saw this, I was kind of shocked. My grandfather would take a raw chicken egg, and he would take a small, like the end of a fork, for example, one of the sharp edges of a fork, and he would work on the end of the chicken egg, and he'd poke a little hole in it. I mean, a little tiny hole. And then he'd go to the other end of the chicken egg, and he'd poke a little hole in that and peel away the little pieces that were left. And then he'd put it up to his mouth, he'd hold it up, and he would just suck the egg right out of the shell. Have you ever seen that?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I've done it. I mean, it's one of the ways by which you eat a raw egg. It's like without having to use a container to pour it into. You're on the road and you just want to have something to fuel yourself. You can poke the holes in it like you did and just suck it out. That's totally. And then today's eggs, you got pasture-raised eggs now where they're eating enough grass that they got all the vitamin A, vitamin K2, and vitamin D. I don't know if there's vitamin K2, but I know there's vitamin A. So the more yellow, the more orange, the more red your yolk is, the more vitamin A is in there. And that's from the eating the grass and stuff. But I was going to say, for people that are like totally turned off, can't get over the idea of eating raw, I want to say that, yeah, you can somewhat subtract from the negatives of cooked if you take at least one time every year and you do a 10-day juice fast while you take a bulking agent like clay and the soluble fiber stuff, and you drink the soluble fiber and stuff with clay 4 times a day with some herbs, with some vegetable juice, basically clean out the alimentary canal so it's super clean and your whole body gets clean. And so you catch up with the detox process when you give your body the break that it needs every once in a while of not eating and fasting on juices. So that's one way to continue to eat cooked foods and, All
right, so here's a question that sort of ties with that. So we have a neighbor who said to me, hey, I've got to get a colonoscopy and I'm going to take this stuff and I'm going to be drinking. I'm going to be on the toilet for the next, couple of hours. Is that should we do that as a practice, maybe, a couple times a year, clean ourselves out that way? Or is that destructive compared to what you were talking about with the 10-day juice fast and the soluble fiber and the clay?
Well, the way that I'm talking about it is all regenerative. Doing any kind of a caustic, intestinal laxative that's a drug laxative is harmful. So then it's really not cleaning you out. You're getting rid of just, say, the immediate fecal contents, but most people don't know that your body builds up a mucus layer and in many instances a fecal matter layer that dries on, and it doesn't come off from just one cathartic cleansing. You have to do this, soluble fiber with juice and clay. The fiber expands and becomes the broom. The clay becomes the magnet. So as it passes through the intestines, and you take a good intestinal cleanser like lower bowel formula, like 2 capsules in between these shakes, you do that 4 times a day, and that's going to act like Easy Off and clean this mucus and this fecal matter off. And the clay and the fiber will act to brush it and pull it off so that it comes out in literally like plastic rubber. And so that's what happened to me when I did my cleanse when I was 21, because for 4 years I had serious constipation from mercury poisoning. So I did that 10-day cleanse, and all this tire rubber fecal matter came out on days 5 through 8, and I felt like a brand new human being. And I also felt a lot of love. It was kind of a spiritual experience too. So it's a gift you're giving yourself. It's not depriving yourself to do a juice fast. It's actually, you'll look younger, you'll feel younger. It's quite a pleasant experience, and all that. It's nice to feel your stomach sunken in again and really not protruding anymore too. And that's one of the things that can happen when you do this. Your stomach starts being flat again.
Interesting you mentioned that. I was going to bring this up. That I was looking through one of the magazines, and there was an article. Actually, it was an advertisement for the Farm Bureau, and the Farm Bureau is an insurance company. And they had all these members of the employees of the Farm Bureau. They're all getting their picture taken. They're standing, all proud to be members of the Farm Bureau. And almost every one of them was way overweight. Yeah. they were really proud to be in this picture. But if they actually got a chance to see themselves, they would have said, I think I better do something about this body that I'm carrying around. And when you mentioned the protruding belly, that's one of the things that came to mind. So can they do something if they wanted to reduce their weight and have a lower body mass index than the one who's in the obese category? Can they do something immediately?
Yeah, immediately. It's just this cleanse I'm talking about. And if you do it right, you still have energy and you can suppress your appetite. You're not consistently hungry or anything. And you can do 10 days on fresh vegetable and fruit juices with these supplements, and you'll drop pounds and pounds, and you'll look younger and feel younger. And if you've got aches and pains, they tend to go away. You become more flexible. That's one thing I noticed about a fast is always become more limber and flexible. It's really nice.
Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. We're going to be talking about automobile efficiency, part 3, with Charles in Ohio. But I have a quick comment to make. Blake and I were talking. Blake is our engineer at GCN, and we were talking about meals at, around the dinner table. And I mentioned that I don't allow cell phones in the house. And I remember a time when we had some family friends over, and they brought their millennial children with them, and so we're having lunch on the weekend at the kitchen table, and then the millennials put their cell phones on the kitchen table. Next thing you know, the cell phones are on their lap. Next thing you know, they're texting, and I'm trying to figure out why they're here. Why are they with us? Why didn't they just stay home if they're going to do that? I've seen this. And it's impolite. And I suggest that if you're going to have dinner as a family, which I think you should, no television, no distractions, no cell phones, and meet as a family, discuss what you're going to do as a family. Here's what we've done today. Here's what we need to do. Here's how we're going to do it. Who is going to participate in doing it, and have a plan to solve the issues, the tasks, projects as a family, and rebuild that family structure, the family structure of probably the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, possibly into the 70s. It worked. And that's what we do here at our family. I just wanted to share that. Charles in Ohio, welcome.
Good morning. Glad to be with you today.
Yeah. How do you feel about what I said about cell phones?
Oh, it's an issue that I'm still in the stone ages of. I enjoy a landline. I do have a cell phone and use it. It is a tool that we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner on. And but yeah, there are times that they are inappropriate. I agree.
Yeah. And we have a landline here at the farmhouse. So, Charles in Ohio, we have done a couple of broadcasts on automobile efficiency, part 1, part 2. This is part 3. And if we can start with automatic transmissions, I'll tell you why. We have a Dodge Cummins turbo diesel pickup truck. It's got an automatic transmission. And we use it to pull trailers. It's a 4-wheel drive. It's a heavy 2,500 truck, 3/4 ton. And we use it to pull a gooseneck trailer, a 26-foot gooseneck trailer. Sometimes we have 10,000 pounds on the trailer. Sometimes the whole trailer weight is 18,000 pounds. Sometimes we pull a cattle trailer with it. Sometimes it's just a flatbed gooseneck trailer. But we use it as a farm truck to pull heavy loads. Sometimes we pull hay. Bottom line is, we have found that the transmission, after 350,000 miles or so, needs to be rebuilt. And, we've changed the fluid regularly. We've changed the transmission fluid regularly, the filters regularly. But we have found that the heat that we are now experiencing this summer is way hotter than we've experienced before. And it finally caused a failure that has put us in a position where we have to rebuild the transmission. So for $45, we bought a transmission cooler, and we're going to stick it on the trucks. We bought 2 of them, and they're going to be on a Chevy pickup truck, which is just a V6, which has a trailer hitch on it, and we pull a 16-foot trailer with that, and the 3/4 ton Dodge turbo diesel truck. And the reason is we want to lower the transmission temperature. And the only way we can do that is to add more cooling to the transmission fluid. And so for $45, we can prevent damage to our transmissions. Now here's a chart that I'm looking at. Now the transmission temperature, if it's 175 degrees, the fluid temperature, you can expect, a little more than 100,000 miles out of your automatic transmission. If it gets to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, you're looking at maybe 75,000 miles out of your transmission. If the temperature is 225 degrees, you're looking at maybe 45,000 miles. By the time you get to 325 degrees, you're looking at a transmission lasting less than 500 miles. So the life of the transmission is pretty much directly proportional to the temperature. So the lower the temperature, the longer your transmission will last. So what we've decided to do is reduce the temperature of the transmission fluid. Charles, what are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. You just always have this insight. They've done work for years, and the aftermarket, I especially always pay attention to innovators in the aftermarket, like B&M and Transco, just to name two. I mean, they know, and the factory knows that heat is very damaging to automatic transmissions and everything you can do. And see, the factory does the same thing on the taxi cabs and the police cars, and the vans always come with extra coolers for transmission fluid and larger radiators for heat dissipation, and like police cars with it, and taxi cabs with extended idling. And the automotive industry itself does a great deal of work to keep track and cover these issues.
I saw a police car sniping with radar on a really hot summer day. And what this cop did, I guess there were a couple of cops involved in this. They were working in tandem. I guess that would be a gang. That they were a gang of cops. And so the guy with the radar gun was sitting in his air-conditioned cruiser, but he had the hood propped open a little bit. So he knew that for him to be cool, he had to add more cooling capacity to his cruiser, and he thought that the way to do that would be to let some of the heat escape by raising the hood a little bit on his cruiser. And of course, that would prevent him from doing a hot pursuit because his hood would be up, but he had someone else to help him in his gang for that. So, yes, idling is rough on a transmission. What about stop and go? So, many of us have jobs, and we commute back and forth to work, and sometimes it's bumper to bumper. I think the term they used to use is rubbernecking. You'd be really close to the car in front, and the heat from that vehicle and the road temperature and the sun and just driving up that underhood temperature, raising the temperature of the transmission, just that creeping along with the automatic transmission, cause the temperature to increase. What do we do, in your mind, to prevent all this if we already have a vehicle? From a service perspective, from a fluid perspective, from a cooling perspective, what is the best bang for the buck?
Oh, they, like you've covered before, they make full synthetics available for vehicles, and they make synthetic additives, which are friction modifiers that are designed to help the operation of the vehicle. And we go back to our basics and understand that it's just a choice that the individual has to make, especially in the automobiles are designed to operate within certain parameters. And like you're saying, when you get extreme weather, that's on the extreme envelope of their operating characteristics. So you would be well advised to add to investigate the full synthetics or the additives. And as you do that, one thing to do to test it is to monitor the temperature of your transmission and engine. That's the first advantage you see by using these, because, see, that heat goes back to the basics. When that heat is generated, and that's the difference between when you're driving an automatic vehicle and you're driving a manual vehicle of the same weight and characteristics. Generally, the manual transmission has the capability with the proper driver to get an improved mileage because that engine is coupled to the rear wheel through mechanical means. When you use an automatic transmission, it's coupled to the rear wheel through mechanical and fluid means. And that fluid is a little slippery, and there's a little bit of waste, and that waste comes out in heat. So the temperature will always tell. So you monitor the transmission's temperature. When you add a synthetic, you will expect to see a drop in temperature, and that's a drop in losses. And an increase
Now, when you say synthetic, are we talking about the transmission fluid, or are we talking about engine lubrication oil, or are we talking about both?
We are talking about both.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Dodge, 1999 Dodge Cummins turbo diesel that we have here at the farm requires synthetic transmission fluid. The Chevrolets, we've got a 1994 full-size turbo diesel Blazer, and it uses more of a conventional Dexron 3, which is not synthetic. Now, are you saying that we could improve the efficiency of that 1994 Chevrolet Blazer by using a Dexron-approved fluid that is synthetic?
Exactly, and you bring up several points. That's good you notify people to make sure it's approved synthetic from the manufacturer, because they use different plate materials in the transmission, friction materials, that some of them are incompatible with certain additives. So, yeah, exactly. And see, that's one way that the Cummins got fuel mileage by adding the synthetic from the factory.
Okay. When we come back, I'd like to share a story with you. I was towing a trailer, and I overheated the differential fluid, the rear end fluid in the truck, and I'll tell you what I did about it. I'd like to hear your comments. We'll be right back. Charles with us. He's in Ohio. And Charles, I was pulling this trailer with that 1994 Chevrolet Blazer turbo diesel. They didn't make many of them, but in diesel. They made plenty of Blazers, but not very many in turbo diesel. And so it has this 6.5 liter V8, and I was pulling this pretty heavy trailer up and down the mountains. It was a pretty warm day. And by the way, I noticed that as you go through the cities, temperature can increase 10, 15, almost 20 degrees at times in the cities in the summer as compared to the countryside. So if you're, on a 1,000-mile trip or 1,100-mile trip, you can certainly notice the difference from city temperatures to the countryside temperatures. And I believe that's because of more black pavement absorbing the solar rays and providing more heat to the air, and the black roofs and also the all the air conditioning running, taking the heat out of the buildings and dumping it outside. So it's hotter outside in the cities than it is in the countryside, at least in my experience. And what I found out was during these hot days that the differential fluid in the rear end or rear axle of this Chevy truck would tend to overheat and boil outside the vent tube. So it would push the expansion and the heat of the friction would boil the differential fluid out of the differential. And the answer that I found was kind of simple. It was take the differential cover off, take out all the fluid, put the differential cover back on with a new gasket, and replace the fluid with fully synthetic Mobil 1, meeting the same viscosity specifications. That solved the problem. Have you experienced something like that?
No, not exactly, but it's well known that the synthetics have a better load carrying capacity, and thereby increased efficiency and cooler running, always cooler running. And that's what we're looking at with the vehicle, just like our light bulbs. The incandescents waste energy in the form of heat, and light-emitting diodes are cool energy, more efficient. And that's what we go for.
Okay. And so if we're going to choose an engine oil, motor oil for the engine, there are several things to look at. One is called the API, American Petroleum Institute's service grade, and it's a 2-letter indicator as to the service level of that particular oil. And then there's a viscosity. Can you tell us a little bit about what the API, American Petroleum Institute service designator, is? And it's on all the oil. So if you go to wherever you buy oil, whether it be the Chinese factory outlet or the automotive store, and you look at this container of oil, whether it be 1 quart, 4 quarts, 5 quarts, whatever it is, it will say API service and then 2 letters. It'll also say SAE and then maybe something like 5W-30 or 10W-40 or 30. It'll have a designation as to the viscosity. And it may or may not say resource conserving. So those are the items to look for on the oil container. Can you tell us, Charles, what they mean?
No, I'm not. I'm not up on the ratings right now. I could.
Okay.
I could
all right.
that point.
All right. If you'd like, I can talk about it, and you can chime in. So if you're going to buy energy, if you're going to buy oil, it'll say API service, and the current letter is SN. Now, back in the 1920s, 1930s, they started out with SA. S stands for spark, meaning a spark plug type engine. SA was the first designation. Then SB, which was a new improved version of the oil. Then SC, SD, E, F, G. Now we're all the way up to SN. So that's how the oils are designated. SN is the current latest, and allegedly you can use a later designation to supersede a previous designation. That's the way it works. So you can look for that, and then you need to have the viscosity. Charles, can you share with us what viscosity means?
That's the
When we come back.
Slickness of the oil itself.
It's about engine oils, and the American Petroleum Institute has a service oil classification. It starts with SA, and S stands for spark, like spark plugs. Okay, there's another designation that begins with the letter C that stands for combustion. So diesel engines are combustion engine; they don't have spark plugs, and those oils suitable for diesel engines are designated with the letter C as the first letter. There's another letter that follows, and gasoline-powered engines with spark plugs are designated with the letter S for spark. So SA was the first designation, and that is obsolete. It's not suitable for any automobile gasoline-powered engines built after 1930. So 1930 and before. Then the next oil to come out would be SB, and that's not suitable for gasoline engines built after 1951. Then SC was next, and that's not suitable for engines that are gasoline powered, built after 1967. SD is, again, obsolete and is not suitable for engines built after 1971. SE was after that, not suitable for engines built after 1979. Then there's SF, that's obsolete. SG, obsolete. SH. Let's see. SF would be up until about 1988. SH is about 1993. SJ is about 2001. SL is 2004. SM, 2011. And then SN is current. So that's the API service classification for passenger car engines and light trucks. And I mentioned that C stands for compression. That's for diesels. Then we get into the next thing you need to think about when you buy oil, and that is the SAE designation, which relates to viscosity. And they have a W for winter in that designation. Charles, can you help us out with learning more about that?
Oh, yeah, viscosity is very important. The factory and the oil manufacturers do a lot of work to determine the viscosity of oil, and that's the slickness or the slipperiness to alleviate friction between components, moving components, and wear and friction components. Basically, the higher the number, I'll have to pass this back to you also.
All right. So the higher the number, so let's say you're looking at SAE 10. That would be thin oil. SAE 30 would be a little thicker. SAE 40 would be thicker than that. So traditionally you would want a thicker oil in the summer because the engine's going to be hotter and it's going to be under more stress, and you really want a little bit thicker oil, but it's going to thin out as the oil heats up. You want a thinner oil in the winter because as the oil is colder, it becomes even more thick. Think of the oil that you have in your refrigerator. If you have some cooking oil that you put in the refrigerator, as the temperature of the oil gets cooler, the oil gets more gelatinous and thicker, and it's really hard for the engine to turn over in a thick oil like that in the wintertime. So that's why you'd want a thinner oil in the winter. So that's where you come out with these multi-grade oils. And when I say that, I'm talking about 5W30. So 5 would be the viscosity, thin viscosity for the winter, and 30 would be for the summer. And you can get a multi-grade, which is 5W30, which you can use summer and winter. Okay? The W stands for winter use. So 5W is 5 can be used in the winter, -30 for the summer. That's a great way to go, and that's considered in most circles to be an energy-conserving oil because it's not so thick that it's hard for the oil pump in the engine to push around. So it's a little thinner, gives you a little bit better mileage, and then we get to conventional oil versus synthetic oil. Now, what I do, and this is just a shade tree mechanics way of looking at oil, I will take an engine oil and I will put one drop between my thumb and my forefinger, and I will slowly increase the distance between my thumb and forefinger. And I'd like to get a look at how much I can stretch that oil. The more I can stretch it, the less I think it will be lubricating. I want an oil that is that's really hard to stretch. And you'll find, if you try that, you'll see that synthetic oils will not stretch very far. And I believe they lubricate way better. But there's a downside. If you have an older engine, let's say a couple 100,000 miles, like 200,000 miles, and everything's good and you have no leaks, and you put synthetic oil in it, you might find that your engine now leaks. It leaks out of, seals. It's more slippery. And that's what I found. So I found that some of our older engines, let's use synthetic oil. Got a leak. Let's, at the next oil change, switch back to conventional oil, and the oil leak stops. Have you noticed that, Charles?
Yeah, that's pretty widely believed that the synthetics will tend to find any void there is that they can escape through. And yeah, they in colder weather, usually heavier oil grades or heavier viscosity oils are intended for gear assemblies like differentials and transfer cases. And they do have the different designating numbers. 530 has a wider range that is general use oil that can be used for lazy people to run throughout the year, whereas the characteristics of the oil do change with temperature also. Yeah, well, like you're saying, you do want to. but when you start the engine in cold weather, again, the oil will tend to be at its thickest, and that's why you go to the thinner oil, and they designed it back in the 60s when I started, when most of my interest was peaked. The 530 oil was unheard of. The 5 and 10 generally, well, you could get a 1040 oil was a wide range oil back then, but now modern engines, the clearances are tighter, and they can exist and work with the thinner oils. Because when you start a car now, the thinner oil allows them to achieve economy and emissions because it'll flow through the tighter tolerance parts as it warms up.
I was looking at a relatively new General Motors automobile, and I was under it and watching my son change the oil, and I noticed that this particular new General Motors car requires that the oil meet a new specification, and that new specification has a name. It's called Dexos, DEXOS. And General Motors says that that Dexos designation represents a high quality, robust oil formulation to meet some of the most rigorous specifications in the industry. So if you have a relatively new, and I think this would be like in the last 5 years or so, General Motors engine, you've got to use an oil that meets the Dexos specification, or you can damage your engine. Have you had any experience with that?
No, not really, but the factory does constantly change oil requirements and designation, and they will void a warranty. So that's why people alleviate a lot of those problems by going back to the service facility, the factory service facilities for maintenance. And like you say, consult your manual. You don't want to get on the wrong side of that, and history has shown it will. There are changes in the fluids that will damage older engines, and that's why power steering and transmissions and coolant systems, they do come up with new ideas. I'll be on the factory for their innovations, but good comes with bad. So you have to, it's an education thing, constant. That's why your program is so good. You got to keep people informed as to changes.
Well, back in a couple decades ago, it was pretty simple. If you had a power steering system, you could, I'm talking about 1980 to 2000, typically, not always, but typically, you could use automatic transmission fluid as a substitute for power steering fluid. Now, Clash, I want you to be very careful that you listen to what I'm saying about this. You can't always do that now. For example, if you have a Mercedes, they have a hydraulic fluid that's not $5 a quart. It's $20 a quart. And it's not the same. It's not the same. Not only does it not have the Mercedes logo on the can, it's not the same fluid. So you should not use automatic transmission fluid, which you could use in almost any vehicle between 1980 and 2000 in your power steering unit. Can't do that in a Mercedes that's 1999 and newer. Now I'm going from memory here, so make sure you do your own research. But what I'm saying is, if you talk to an old mechanic and the guy says, oh yeah, well we always used to use ATF, automatic transmission fluid, in the power steering. He's talking about 1980 to 2000. It's different now. So you really need to check the specifications that your vehicle requires. Otherwise you can do a lot of damage. And I mean a lot of damage. You can damage the power steering system. And you can be looking at $1,000 to repair it. So be careful. what fluid you use on your vehicle. We'll be right back. That's just a quick comment about power steering. You know, you should check your power steering fluid reservoir, whenever you check your oil. And I think you should check your oil at least once a week, and certainly before going on a long journey. And as the heat increases this summer, it's more important to make sure that your oils, your fluids, are all topped off. Because if you have more fluid in your reservoirs, whether it be power steering or the engine or the transmission, up to the maximum that is allowed by that manufacturer, do not overfill. But you'll have a slightly cooler running engine or power steering system or transmission if you have the appropriate amount of fluid in it as compared to less than the recommended amount. And if you'll hear this in parking lots, somebody will be backing out of a parking spot and you'll hear this squeal coming from under the hood as they turn the wheels sharply. That's overpressuring the power steering system. Don't do that. Don't turn your power steering all the way to the end of its travel, meaning don't turn the wheel so that they're turned to the end of its travel. It puts an enormous amount of strain on the power steering pump, the hoses and the seals and so forth. So if you hear that noise at the end of the lock to lock on your power steering system, that's what that is. But if you hear some squeals before that point, you're probably low on power steering fluid. And if you want to check it, you can. Just take a clean paper towel and wipe off the power steering fluid cap, okay, on the power steering reservoir. And make sure that you don't introduce any dirt into the power steering reservoir. And you'll see a minimum and maximum. And you can also look up how to do it on the internet. But it's really simple. And the difference between minimum and maximum is only a couple ounces. So you ought to check that. That's probably something that we overlook. What do you think, Charles?
All excellent advice. That's very true. Year to year, looking at the factory's changes and modifications of power steering systems, like you say, and foreign manufacturers going to hydraulics, Mercedes system. I'm not at all familiar with that, but even when they went from standard older systems to the rack and pinion, it became much more critical to constantly monitor, and even I think there are, I'm not sure, there may be some factory specifications for or recommendations for changing fluid in power steering systems, because like you're saying, any contamination or grit is bad for the components within that system. That's why it's not as common anymore to have rack. Well, everything is still done, but we're not having rack failures like we did several years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was telling Blake before this hour began that heat is really a problem. And in an emergency situation, if you're in a situation where you're driving and it's really, really hot out and it looks like you're going to overheat, and but your fluids you check them and you haven't boiled over, so you just need a little bit more cooling so that you don't overheat. One old trick is to put down your windows, make sure you turn your air conditioner off, turn your heat on to maximum, and turn the fan on for maximum heat, maximum air flowing through your heating system. And you will engage your car's heater as an auxiliary radiator. And it will help. And we've had to do that. Over the years, we've been pulling a load, and it's really hot, and the temperature's climbing, and we have no choice. So we have turned on the heater. Have you ever done that, Charles?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, like you're saying, that is added cool.
Yeah. Charles, I want to thank you for being with us today, sharing your expertise with automotive engines, fluids, temperatures, and efficiency. I really appreciate it. I know our class does as well. So Charles will be back with us again and again, and we'll be talking about automotive efficiency and what you can do. And you can do it yourself and save money in the meantime. Charles, again, thank you. Class above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.